Welcome. It's always sunny in, I guess, Sweden this time. I'm your host, Red. Want you to introduce yourselves.
My name is Patty.
And I'm Lugia.
All right. Which one of you wants to die and take over Death's job?
Ooh, me!
Today we're going to be talking about the Phantom Carriage from 1921, directed by Victor Sodström. I still haven't figured out quite how to speak Swedish yet, so forgive some mispronunciations. Before we jump into that, let's just pay some respects to some actors who passed. James Vanderbeek passed away. He's probably best known for playing Dawson in Dawson's Creek. Although I'm familiar with him due to his role in Rules of Engagement, Rules of Attraction. It's like a Bret Easton Ellison adaptation. So same dude who wrote American Psycho. And the director is the co-writer of Pulp Fiction. But he was in a bunch of stuff. You probably saw him in different TV shows and whatnot. Rest in peace. Other deaths that happen is Bud Cort. He's probably best known for starring in Hal Ashby's movie Harold and Maude. I don't know if you guys ever seen Harold and Maude, but and he was also in Heat, Dogma, MASH, and Wes Anderson movie or two. So yeah, I'm sure you guys have seen his work. But he's a very talented actor. He actually started acting when he was a kid. That's what his role in Harold and Maude was. He played the Harold, who was a child, and yeah, I'm a big fan of his work. So rest in peace. So the Phantom Carriage was based on the 1912 novel "Thy Soul Shall Bear Witness." That's the English translation. No fucking idea how to say this in Swedish. This is like Korkarlen. Swedish words are very odd. This book was actually commissioned by the Swedish Association to be like, this book was originally written as a PSA. It was meant to warn people about the dangers of tuberculosis. And then she wrote this like epic, Dickensian story about like moral
Like
about almost
redemption.
like moral like absolution. Yeah. Yeah, it was directed by Victor Sodström, who also acts in the movie. I'm not sure if you recognize him, but he was the dude in Wild Strawberries. This movie is actually a huge influence in Swedish culture. Ingmar Bergman, I believe, stated as his favorite film. Did we talk about Wild Strawberries, actually?
We did not.
All right. Well, this is that's a movie directed by the guy who did the Seventh Seal, which I know we did talk about.
That explains why I did think of Seventh Seal watching this movie.
Yeah. This movie was a huge influence on the Seventh Seal and just that director in general. I got some hot takes, which will probably shock some people, but I honestly think Sodström is a better director than Bergman. Like, I like his movies more. Yeah, this was actually released on New Year's Day in Scandinavia, which makes sense. It was not released on midnight in the United States. That happened a little bit after. This movie was renowned at the time for special effects and its innovative narrative structure, with the flashbacks within flashbacks. So there was a deal by the production company to adapt at least one of Lagerlof's novels for film every year. So Sodström has actually made 3 of these adaptations prior to the Phantom Carriage, all of which were well received by audiences, critics, and Lagerlof herself. So he specifically chose the Phantom Carriage for this one because the previous books were all in a rural setting, and he wanted to, shoot in a city for once. There's initially some pushback because the elements of occultism and mysticism and all like the more fantastical elements. It was again the 20s, so they're like, "Can we shoot that? Like, that doesn't seem possible." And then like Sodström was like, "Don't worry, I'll figure something out." The script was written in 8 days, though it's adapted from the book, so that's probably less impressive.
Like the work was most of the work was already there.
It's also a silent film, so imagine like that must have been difficult because you're like basically just writing out all the actions and then writing out these little cards that have to distill everything. So I don't know, it might have been a more complicated process than it is like say nowadays, but
The actors
yeah.
would still have to know what emotions to convey within the scene.
Yeah, so like you have to like just basically like direct them and then because they're not like actually like really saying the dialogue all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe they are. I mean, I don't know if you guys know any lip readers. We can like maybe put them in front of a silent film and be like, "Can you tell what they're saying?"
In this one, we need Swedish lip readers.
Yeah, okay, maybe not for this one. Yeah, that's true.
I might know a Swede or two, but I don't know if they're lip readers, so I doubt it.
Yeah, post-production was famously long and intense due to the special effects. This is one where I guess like all the pre-production, all the actual filming, not that long. All of the time went into post-effects.
Post-production.
Yeah, post-production. So double exposure made in camera was basically how they did the kind of ghost effects, and it had been used before in Sir Orange Treasure in 1990. 1919 actually. But here it was far more advanced because they used much more layers. So this allowed the ghost to like walk around in 3 dimensions when before it was like much more 2 dimensional. I think at one point like you can see the ghost being covered by an object in the foreground, which yeah, that shit was not possible before. One difficulty was with the cameras were hand cranked, meaning that the camera had to be cranked at the exact same speed in different exposures for the results to appear natural. So that was like crazy to me, just because like finding out that that's how cameras used to work back then. Let's just jump right into the movie. So the plot is on New Year's Day, a dying Salvation Army sister, Edith, has one last wish to speak to David Holm. So David is a drunkard sitting in a graveyard telling his two drinking buddies about his old friend George, who told him about the legend that the last person to die each year has to drive death's carriage and collect the souls of everyone who died the following year. Right after saying this, George dies himself, and no, his friend Georges died New Year's the previous year, and yeah, funny enough, David also dies right on New Year's, and ironically gets to meet his buddy Georges again. But yeah, Gustafsson, a colleague of Edith, tries to persuade him to go with her, and instead, David, gets hit in the head and dies. And yeah, the driver is Georges, and then Georges reminds David how he lived happy with his life with Anna, and basically like the movie, we're kind of like. It's sort of similar to A Christmas Carol or It's a Wonderful Life, where we kind of go through David's life.
It did remind me a lot of like an inverse It's a Wonderful Life, because instead of like being shown like all the good deeds that you've done and this is what would have happened if you weren't there, it's kind of the opposite, where it's like, you're a terrible person, this is what you did, you should feel fucking sorry for yourself.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of like A Christmas Carol, because it kind of felt like it even had like kind of like the Ghosts of Christmas, past and whatnot. Because like we first see them like happy, which reminds me of the past sequence where like we see Scrooge wasn't always a bastard. He was always kind of he once had a soul.
He was human once.
Yeah, so he once like lived happy with his wife and the 2 children, his brothers, until George, leads them astray. David, becomes an alcoholic, and his brother was basically sentenced to jail for killing a man while drunk, and then his wife leaves him over this incident. Anyway, through this we like flashback, we sort of see him meet Edith. Yeah, basically there's a promise that he has to meet in 1 year. So I guess this means this takes place a year prior, which is interesting because like that's kind of crazy. Like this is basically just like 1 year this guy's complete fucked his life up. But anyway, after this promise, they send him to Edith, and then we get another flashback where we see Edith once found David in a bar with Gustafsson, another man, and Edith pursued the other man to go home with his wife and gave Gustafsson an advertisement for Salvation Army meeting. So at the meeting, Gustafsson submits himself to God, but David remained completely unrepentant. And yeah, and Anna was at the meeting, but David did not recognize her. Later Anna told Edith who she was, and Edith tried to effect a reconciliation. First couple was optimistic, but soon Dave's behavior drove Anna to despair once again. And one night, Anna pleaded him not to expose her children to his consumption, which is the same fatal disease Edith caught from him. And this is also what the I guess intention of the book was. Like this whole epic story is just trying to tell people, warn people about consumption and tuberculosis.
This was also like around the time of the Spanish flu, so maybe there's some parallels there as well.
Anyway, when he refused, Anna locked herself in the kitchen and tried to flee again with the children. And I'm sure many of you recognize this scene, but this scene probably seems a little bit familiar. And yes, Stanley Kubrick got the Jack, Here's Johnny axe chase scene from there.
I had a feeling it was eerily similar.
And then basically the movie ends like the final act is Edith goes. George does see Edith. George goes into Edith's room and she begs him to see David again. And when basically like Edith gives like this guilty thing which moves David, and due to seeing this David's regret, she can I guess rest in peace. And yeah, basically David gets like not a second chance, I guess, but like he's given a chance to get redemption, I guess. I don't know.
Not like a second chance at life, although the film does end like when he gets that chance. So we don't really know what happens if he like dies again because he's destined to be the next rider of the carriage or whatever.
We basically he's given a second chance, but like let's just get into it. So obviously this reminded me of A Christmas Carol. I've mentioned that before, but what I found interesting is I feel like this has like a much more sort of dark tonality to it, because like A Christmas Carol is more of like we're just seeing like these 3 we're seeing like him before he changed, sort of the impact he have and what could happen if he doesn't change. With this one, it's more of like we're seeing the slow sort of descent, his previous chance at getting better, but then he was failure to, and then like he's basically just given one last chance. The
Basically,
ending,
Christmas Carol if he never met the ghost of Christmas Future.
yeah.
Well,
Here's the thing,
kind of.
I don't fully agree because like I feel like we are sort of like we're not given the ghost of Christmas Future, but like the same effect has sort of happened where he is sort of seeing, what could happen again. I don't know if
because he sees Annie like making the poison because she's gonna poison herself and the kids.
But anyway, like the ending, I think like it owes itself a lot to Christmas Carol, but like one like notable way it differs to me is like interesting. Now, I love A Christmas Carol. That's one of my favorite stories. But so this is gonna sound like a criticism, but like just want to make that. But so Scrooge basically like deserves this, begs for a second chance. But here, what I find interesting is that David basically acknowledges he doesn't really deserve one. He only begs to spare his wife and children, which to me is incredibly compelling because like it feels to me hypothetically if like Scrooge found out that like him dying was set in stone, that couldn't be changed, but he could save Tiny Tim. That would make his redemption seem less out of self-interest and more out of like I guess that's what like here it feels like his redemption is not out of self-interest. Like, we talked about Sinbad the other day, and I feel like that's maybe what that movie is trying to do here, where like the shift is like he's given a second chance because he wants to like save someone else. I feel like that there's like a different color to it than how Christmas Carol is.
So,
what did you guys think? I don't know. You guys got thoughts?
So general thoughts. When you told us this was a silent film, man, you weren't kidding. Like no music, just complete nothingness from the audio department.
Okay.
And I get movies didn't have audio from the start. They had to evolve.
I think you might have found a version with like some piano music.
Where did you watch this?
I watched the version on Wikipedia.
I watched the version on YouTube, and that had music.
Okay, so I'm watching. I can't speak for that. I saw the version with nothing.
Didn't this happen when we saw Joan of Arc? Like we saw different versions, and our experience was different. Yeah, it had music, but it had like a different soundtrack.
Yeah, but this is a case of no audio and audio. Anyway,
I did not realize the version on Wikipedia had no audio. My bad.
I'm not gonna lie. At the start, watching that version of the film, I was a bit concerned because I was like, okay, me and my ADHD ass, would I be able to sit through a nearly 2-hour silent drama with no audio at all? To my surprise, yeah. I actually liked this more than I thought I would. I thought the narrative structure was pretty interesting. I thought the effects, especially for the time, were really impressive. I thought the performances were great. This was a pleasant surprise on my end.
I want to compliment the use of color filters real quick because they use them in very specific time periods within the movie. So in present day, it's supposed to be dark and gloomy because, death is around the corner. So it goes for like this sort of dark blue hue. And then when we get snippets of David's life, when he's happy, we got like a rose tinted filter to show that like these were the best moments of his life before everything went to shit. And then the rest of that is like a sepia tone.
I was surprised by how well the kind of ghost effects were, because have you guys ever seen Darby O'Gill and the Little People?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like a movie I grew up with, and I still love that movie, but like the banshee effects in there are like very like kind of bad, and I feel like it was like going for a similar effect as this, but for some reason this one I don't know, there's more of like a verisimilitude. I just kind of like bought it more, and like it wasn't like perfect or anything, but like I was like, I mean, it kind of looked as real as I could expect.
When the background aligns, yes. I did not like the way it looked when the carriage was going over the ocean. That just looked bad.
That was like I'll give it a bit of a pass. This is a nearly 100-year-old film, and for the time, this was incredibly innovative.
I think maybe he just wanted to flex.
This is over 100 years. This is 105 years old. I did think it was kind of cool, when you could see like stuff in the foreground covered up. That was also kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know. I just found this movie very like sort of emotionally compelling. It's one of those movies I'm shocked it's never been remade. It's in the public domain, and A Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life. Like these are all classics that got remade over and over and over again. And like you would expect this story to be the same thing, but part of me just wonders
it's in an incredibly similar vein, yeah.
Yeah, so part of me is just wondering if it's because like it's almost too respected, because like there's no definitive version of A Christmas Carol. Like there's no version everyone thinks is like that's the best one. When Phantom Carriage is like widely regarded, yeah. Well, but that was like still like the 12th like adaptation at that point. So like it wasn't just perfect
Oh,
right
I
out
think
the
you mean like
gate.
112.
Yeah, and I guess they never remade It's a Wonderful Life because most people also think It's a Wonderful Life is just perfect right out the gate. And I would agree, but I always think that's kind of interesting how like there's these like timeless stories that can be told over and over and over again, but people kind of respect an adaptation too much to actually want to try it, which is that's kind of funny to me. Yeah, like this is like widely regarded to be like one of, if not the best silent film of all time. I'm not sure, like I fully agree. I think I like Joan of Arc a little bit more, but like I highly recommend like this one. And this is like one I've actually like rewatched for fun. Yeah, I wouldn't say I do a ton, but yeah. I'm kind of interested how like audiences in 1921 reacted because like I feel like we were impressed by the narrative structure to this day, and like movie narrative structure wasn't even like fully established by the 20s. So like there's like triple flashbacks in here, and I'm wondering how they like
not to
took it
mention the
because like I
visual
remember
effects as well, which wasn't really done like that at the time.
like that's impressive, but that's not going to confuse them. But at the same time, when I was like watching this movie, like the first time I saw it, like I wasn't confused even like slightly. So like I don't know, I highly recommend it. I think we all recommend it. And yeah, this is the first Sudstrom movie I saw, but like it definitely has me curious on the rest of his filmography. I know he lived up until the talk era, so I'm curious how he adapted to that too. But it definitely seems like most of his work is in the silent era.
This is our earliest film that we've talked about, right? Because Joan of Arc was 1928. This is 21, I'm pretty sure.
Did we talk about any movies in the tens? No, this is our oldest film. Yeah, interesting.
Setting records.
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine like the oldest film we're ever gonna watch is Birth of a Nation, probably, and I don't think I'm gonna recommend that. No, I mean I don't think I'm gonna recommend Birth of a Nation. I'm just saying that's probably the oldest movie we could reasonably talk about. But I don't have an interest in recommending Birth of a Nation. That movie's racist.
I can go my life without seeing Birth of a Nation. I'm fine with this.
Yeah, like maybe we can check out like some of D.W. Griffith's other movies because those are fine, but like not that one. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to watch this movie Intolerance. I heard it's a masterpiece, and based on the title, I think you can tell it's quite the opposite of what uh, Birth of a Nation was. But yeah, what did you guys think of? Because we talked about the Joan of Arc. So what did you guys think of the acting? It's silent, so it's a different type of acting, but I still want to know how you respond.
In a similar vein to Joan of Arc, the characters have to be a lot more expressive since you can't hear what they're saying. So whenever like they're angry, they need to be like bombastically angry, or if they're sad, they need to be absolutely depressed. It's similar to that in Joan of Arc, but unlike Joan of Arc, you don't get the extreme close-ups to get those reactions. But in this movie's case, I feel like it's a little more natural.
Yeah, that's the main reason why I brought it up. I feel like there was an exaggeration to it, but it didn't feel like that exaggerated. It reminded me of like kind of like the acting of like the 50s almost, where like, it was before New Hollywood, but it was like, it wasn't like full silent craziness. And even like even the axe scene, the Shining scene, it was let's be honest, like Jack Nicholson probably acted more over the top. Yeah, that's not a crazy thing to say, right?
No.
I think like Jack Nicholson
he had the element of audio, but yeah.
Like think about like some of the facial expressions that like Nicholson pulled in like The Shining. Like, yeah, man, he went a little bit crazier.
Well, granted, the intention of both of them was a bit different.
Yeah. I think David's performance was like probably the most interesting to me. Anna's was kind of interesting because like hers had this like delirious to it, and plus she technically got to play her character in like multiple different like states. I mean, they all did, but hers was much more pronounced. It's kind of hard to like talk about, but it's a great movie. Yeah, I guess it's like a recommendation from all of us, right? Thumbs up across the board?
Pretty much, yeah. I will agree with you. I think Joan of Arc is the better film, but this isn't bad in the slightest.
Yeah.
Dated, yes, but not bad.
I feel like Joan of Arc, I think, would probably like hold up a bit better to like, I don't know how to like describe it. Like Joan of Arc feels like almost a bit more modern, but this one also just like, this story just feels timeless. Like I don't know, there's just, those two are like, definitely stand out a lot to me, like out of the many silent films I've seen. Granted, most of the other silent films I've seen are like comedies, but I've seen a few like other ones like Fritz Lang and whatnot. These two definitely stuck with me the most. This and that one Ozu movie we saw,
Throne of Blood.
I Was Born But.
No,
I Was Born But. It was the one with the kids. Remember?
Yeah.
I paired it with Good Morning because yeah, I'd say like those are probably my top 3 silent films. I don't know if you guys have seen many silent films like outside the ones I recommended, but
not really. No,
I've seen like one or two other ones on my own time, but not a whole lot.
I imagine you've seen like a bunch of Chaplin and whatnot, but
I saw one. I think it was a Buster Keaton movie. It's like him on a train.
That was Buster Keaton. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that one. I remember liking that one.
Chaplin one day because I really like Yeah, I grew up with him. I really like a lot of his movies. Modern Times is like probably my favorite. So I guess that's like a teaser for a future episode. We might talk about Modern Times one day. All right, who's recommending this time?
It is
It's
me.
Lugia's turn.
All right. So this is one I know a couple of us have wanted to do for a while now. For me personally, this is a film that I knew from friends and other film critics that this is like one of the greatest films of all time, but quite personally, I never saw what they were talking about. But I want to see if a second viewing would change that. So for next week, we're going to be talking about No Country for Old Men.
Hell yeah, that's my okay. I think I mentioned it on the podcast before. That's probably my favorite movie. This like period. All right, word.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a good episode.
Okay, so every time I watch a Coen Brothers film for the first time, this happened when I saw Big Lebowski like a couple months ago. I'm just like stun locked. I'm like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah, the Coens are very unique because like I don't know. They have a similar like vibe to me as Tarantino, where they like to play with like expectations. But I feel like Tarantino, he likes to like play with expectations in a way that still gives you the catharsis. When the Coens, they usually like go in a different direction, or like they don't always like they don't like giving you the answers. So like a lot of the movies, they kind of feel a little bit unsatisfying, and you kind of have to like dig to sort of like get closure. But that's what I like about them. I kind of like that they kind of demand more work from me as a viewer. But No Country for Old Men is I guess one of the most blatant ones because I don't think Patty's seen it, but
I haven't,
he'll
no.
definitely know what we're talking about when I mean they have a few movies I think are just kind of straightforward. Have you seen Raising Arizona yet?
I have,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, that one is just like that's like a normal one that like I think everyone can enjoy. I mean, it's not normal, but you know what I mean. But like,
Relatively speaking.
It's the unusualness is with like the characters and whatnot. It's not really with like the narrative arc. But I don't know, even in that one, like they don't like get their like. There's a bit like like an odd element to it, but yeah, great movie, No Country for Old Men. Looking forward to talking about it. I don't have a closer for this episode. Besides, I guess don't drink too much or you might get tuberculosis. That is our PSA for this episode. Also, don't cough on people if you have tuberculosis. Wear a mask.